In this video, we're going to create our first script and show how to run it in our game in Unity. Now I still have the square sprite in my scene from the last video, so I'm just going to delete that. I don't need that here. So in the sandbox scene, I'm going to delete on that and hit save. And I'm just going to go into our sample scene and I'm just going to delete the triangle there as well and just save it. Okay, so down in our project folder here, we're in the scenes folder looking at our scenes. Let's go back to assets. Let's right click, create, and let's make a new folder. And I'm going to call this scripts. Now you don't have to do this, but it's really good practice to keep your project folder as neat and clean as you can, just so it doesn't get cluttered. Once you have hundreds or thousands of objects in here, it's very easy to lose track of everything. Okay, so let's open up our scripts folder. Now you can see we're in the scripts folder here, and in the folder it's just empty. Let's create our first script by right clicking. Let's go to create, and you can see here at the top C# script. So if I click on that one, it's going to make me a new script. By default, it's called new behavior. We're just going to name this what we want. So let's just call this first script. And now something I want to mention is if you do rename a script, there's a little bit more you have to do with it than just renaming it here. That can cause some problems. So I'll show you how to handle that right away. Okay, now that we have our script, if we double click on it, that's going to open up Visual Studio that we installed. Now by default, because I had it installed before, it saved my dark mode settings. Yours is probably going to be in light mode by default. So if you prefer dark mode, all you have to do is go up to the top to Tools, Options, and then right here on General, you can see the color theme. So if yours is set on light like this, which I find is very hard on the eyes, you can just go up to Tools, Options, and just change it to dark. And there is a few others here you can try too. Now the next thing is, depending on your screen, the text might be pretty small like it is on mine here. So you can easily resize the text to whatever size you want by just holding down Control on your keyboard and then use the scroll wheel on your mouse. If you scroll up, it makes it bigger, and then if you scroll down, it makes it smaller. So normally I do use something smaller than this, but just so it's very easy for you to read on the screen, I'm just going to make it a very large font like this. Okay, so this is our first script. Now I mentioned a minute ago there, if you rename a script in your project folder, you have to do some other steps. So if you look near the top, it says public class first script. Now for right now, don't worry about public or class. That's something we're going to talk more about later. Think of class as the name of our script. Now, if you rename your script inside of Unity, you also have to rename it here. These two have to match. The file name of our script and this name have to be the exact same, otherwise Unity is going to get an error. So in general, as a practice, it's not common that you rename a script, but I just wanted to mention that in case you ever do need to. Okay, so let's look at what we have in our script here. Don't worry about the top part. We're going to explain what these are more later. For now, you don't need to worry about them. Okay, so the first thing we see in our script here is something that says void start and void update. These are methods, and we're going to talk more about what methods are later, but for now you can think of them as groups of code. So when we look at start, you see these open and closing parentheses. That's just part of making a method. But the important thing we want to look at right now is these open and close curly braces. What these curly braces are doing is saying that everything between them belongs to start right here. And then it's the same thing for update. Everything between these two braces belongs to update. Now there's a comment here, and a comment is just something in our code that's not going to run. It's there for us to help explain what's going on. So in this case, you can see it's got two slashes. So these forward slashes tell Unity and C# that it's a comment. So two forward slashes, and then you can just type any note to yourself here. So in this case, it's telling us what this is doing. Start is called before the first frame update. Now, if you're not familiar with frames, frames is just like in a movie, a TV, or even like a little comic flip book. A frame is every frame or image that you see on your screen on your monitor. And there's many of them per second. So what this does is this runs only once. When we start up our game, this is going to run once. Then update is called once per frame. So what update is going to do is run every frame of your game. And that can be very different computer to computer. One computer could be running at hundreds of frames a second, and another one could be running at 20. Okay, so let's try our first command in C#. And now anytime we type commands, they are case sensitive. So if you type something with a lowercase letter when it should be an uppercase, that's going to give you an error. Don't worry about that too much though. It sounds pretty daunting, but Visual Studio actually has something built in that helps us with this. So the first thing we're going to use is a command called debug. So if I start typing debug, notice I'm typing it as all lowercase letters, even though it does require an uppercase. So Visual Studio, based on what I'm typing, gives me a list of things it thinks I want. So it knows there's a command called debug with a capital D. So now that this came up, I can either click on it with the mouse, but the easiest thing is just press enter when it's highlighted. So you can see it's highlighted in blue. If I use the up and down arrows, I can change which is highlighted. So I'm just going to press enter, and now it corrects the code for me. And then what we want to do is put a period or a dot. And again, it's going to pop up this list with all of the options that we have in debug. What we want is called log. So if I press L, it pops up here log. And now in here, this kind of helps you too. Notice it says logs a message to the Unity console. So what I'm showing you here is this isn't going to actually do any changes in our game itself, but it's going to display something to the console. So this is a way we can tell ourselves what's running in our code, or put troubleshooting messages, or even just notes in our console. So now that we have that typed, we do also have to include an open parentheses. And notice it automatically put a close one because you always need to open and a close. And then inside here, it's going to let me type a message. So we put a message inside double quotes. And then we can type anything we want here. So I'm just going to type my very first script. Now you can put anything in here. This is just a test message. And now notice that I have that. We have this red squiggly line. This is another thing that Visual Studio is going to do for you. It's going to help you troubleshoot errors. So what this squiggly line means is it picks up that something's missing or wrong. If I put the mouse over it, notice it says semicolon expected. So in C#, every time we make a command and we need it to run, we have to put a semicolon at the end of it. So if we just put a semicolon here, notice the red line goes away. And I'm just going to hit Control S to save my script. And just like in Unity, when we have the star, notice if I delete the semicolon, if we look up here at the tab for the script, it has a star at the end. That's telling us that it's not saved. So now I'll just put the semicolon back. I'll hit Control S and the star is gone. And let's go back to Unity and see how this works. Okay, so now I'm in Unity. I do have my console tab here. So let's just click on that. So if you don't have that there, remember you can go up to the window menu and you can either select default layout under layouts, or we can go to the general and then we have console right here. Okay, so I have the console open. Now let's click the play button at the top to run our game. Okay, and it's going to run, but there's nothing in the console. Now the reason for this is because inside our project folder here, you can kind of think of the project folder or window as almost like a toolbox full of tools that you build. So you have a toolbox that you carry around with you with all these tools, but until you actually take them out of that toolbox and use them, they're not doing anything. They're just there for you. That's the same concept in Unity here. If we use the hierarchy, this is like us taking those tools out and using them. So because I haven't added it to the hierarchy, this script is not going to do anything. So right now I'm still in sample scene. This part doesn't matter which scene you're in. You could do with either of them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in here. Remember the shortcut I showed you? Control-Shift-N. That's going to create a new game object. Or if you do prefer using the mouse clicks instead of the shortcut, you can right-click, Create Empty. So whichever method you want. And then once we have it selected here, we can just rename this to anything we want. I'm going to call this scripts. Now this is going to be a game object where I put some scripts on it. The name has no bearing whatsoever. Okay, and even though we're not going to put anything visual, it's a good habit to always reset the transform so we're at 0 position. Okay, so we have this object called scripts. And remember from all of the other videos where we talked about components. Now everything you add to a game object in Unity is a component that gets added on. Scripts are no different. Okay, so with the scripts object selected, we can see it in the inspector. I can just click and drag this on, and notice the icon changes now to show, normally it's a crossed out circle here, and then when I go over, it's a different icon. I can let go, and now my script is added as a component onto this object. Now there are other ways too. With it selected, I could click and drag it right here into the inspector. And if I let go, for some reason it added twice. It shouldn't do that. But either way, we only want it on here once. But I'm just showing multiple ways you can do this. And one other way is the add component button. So I showed how we could add like a sprite renderer previously. We can do the same thing here with our script. So if I start typing in here, first script. Now if I click on it, it's added. So you're going to notice as you progress that most things in Unity, there's multiple ways to do them. Okay, so let's go to our console tab now. Let's run the game again. Okay, and now we have the output saying my very first script. And you can see this number 1 here. This is showing that this displayed one time. And this is going to be important in a minute with what I show you here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our script. I'm going to select this line, hit Control X to cut, and then in Update, Control V to paste. Just going to hit Control S to save. And now if I go back to Unity, now notice the console still has that even though I stopped running my game. So I can hit the clear button here, and that's going to clear it. And another option is if you click on this little arrow, there's an option clear on play. So what that's going to do is every time I run the game when I hit play, it's going to clear anything in the console and start fresh. But if I want to manually clear it, I can just hit it right there. Okay, so let's run the game again. And now we have the same message, but notice what's happening here. If you look at the count, it's constantly increasing. This is because it's running every single frame of the game. So this number is going to go faster or slower based on how fast your frames per second are on your computer, but it's going to constantly increase. So that's the main difference between start and update. Start is going to be for things you only want to happen once when you start. So that could be things like setting health for your character when he spawns, things like that. And then update's always going to be the checks that you want to do on a regular basis. Okay, and the last thing I want to show you here is what happens if we do have something with an error. So you might end up getting an error the first time you try running this if you typed anything wrong. Things like that. So I'm going to delete this semicolon, hit Control S to save. And now it does have the red squiggly line, but say if I missed that or other things where it didn't pick it up right away, sometimes it takes a bit before it refreshes. But if I go into Unity, notice it's not even letting me run the game. It's popping up a red error in here instantly, and it's saying what it thinks the problem is, semicolon expected. And now it's going to tell you in here what script it's in. So this one says first script. And then in brackets, it's going to give you the line number it thinks it's on. So it thinks it's on 16. And then the characters, so 42 characters in. So it's not always the exact spot, but it's going to give you a general idea of where the problem is. Okay, now if I double click this, it's actually going to bring up Visual Studio and go right to where that issue is. So in this case, all I have to do is add a semicolon, save. And if we go back to Unity, it's going to clear in a second.